Hi, I'm Kevin with Omiyad Water Systems. Today we're going to show you how to winterize the Filtomat filter that is a piston style filter. So the first thing we want to do again on these is to run it through a manual cycle. So doing that, you just push down on the button on the ADIP controller, wait a few seconds. This will make sure that the screen is clean before you shut it down. So we'll go into a cycle here in just a second. And then it's second cycle here to finish. Now that we know that the screen is clean, what we want to do now is shut off the inlet and outlet of the filter. So go ahead and do one more flush to release the pressure in the filter. Now we know that the pressure is off on the filter, so we can go and proceed with the winterizing steps. So the first thing we want to do is winterize the ADIP controller. And again, there's two things that we can do for the controller. The first one is to remove the controller off and to store it indoors. If we choose this option, make sure when you take it off that you're storing it inside someplace that is heated where it cannot freeze. And you take the controller off before there's any possibility of a freeze, and you don't put it back on until there's no freeze in the weather. All right, to take this off, all we have to do is just remove the two bolts that are holding the bracket on and remove the tubes on the controller and the solenoid. Just like that. And now you've got the whole controller and solenoid and the bracket all together, and that can be stored inside before there's any freezing and in a heated area. So the second option for winterizing the ADIP controller correctly is you can leave it on the filter, but important steps to follow. There are two tubes on the Filtomats where they're connected to the ADIP controller. What we want to do on those is remove both tubes off of the controller and keep them off. Now the important step on this is to make sure you do this before there's a freeze and leave them off. Do not connect them back on. So once you do that, you can leave it on there, leave these off, and on the solenoid, there's one other step we want to do with the solenoid. We want to remove this tube on the side of the solenoid, and the handle on the solenoid, we want to move it back and forth, and you can see there's a little bit of water that comes out. Moving it back and forth is going to release the water that's potentially on that. You can put the tube back on to the solenoid after you've moved that handle a couple of times. Then, to make sure that the filter body is completely empty, there's a tube here on the bottom here, and you want to be able to release this tube and be able to release all the water in the filter body itself. On yours, there may be a plug here, or on the other side, you can remove the plug and release the water out of that. Once all the water's out, you can put the tube back on and leave that. The next one is to come up to the front of the filter with the accelerator. So the next step that we want to do is make sure that the accelerator is drained properly. So there's two different accelerators that Omiyad's using. This is the new style, and this is the older style Duro. On the Omiyad one, the newer style, what we want to do is where you see the plug on the fitting, and this side here, you'll see an elbow. We want to take this side off, and you need to be careful because there is a spring, and water will sit in this chamber, and we want to dump out any of the water that might be in this area. And then we can reassemble this back on and make sure that it's all seated up. Then on the Duro, what we want to do is the exact same thing, because we want to make sure this port right here, we're going to release this. You can already tell this one still has a little bit of water in it. And we want to release any of the water in this chamber. Once we release the water and push this down just a few times, that will release the water in that chamber. So the last step that we want to do is to drain the filter itself with these two plugs on front. So the first one is on the lid itself. It's a 15 millimeter, and we're just going to release the water that's inside of that chamber. And then the next one is on the front of the piston. Release that plug and let all the water come out of both of those spots. You can leave these open over the winter if you want, but if you're concerned about any bugs or anything getting in there, put the plugs back in after this is all drained out. So just for a quick summary of what we did. So the first step was taking care of the ADIP controller. So we can remove that controller, put it into a heated area before it freezes, or we can remove the two tubes and keep the tubes off, leaving the controller on as long as you do it before it freezes. Next step was the solenoid. Make sure you work that back and forth and clear any of the water in that chamber. Then we went to the filter itself and released the water out of that area. Then making sure that the relay has been released, and then the two plugs on the front of the filter. Follow these steps and you'll have good success.